Welcome to this explainer. Today we're cutting straight through all that AI hype you've been hearing to get to the hard truths. We're going to bypass the typical buzzwords and look at the very real, immediate impact artificial intelligence is having on the business landscape, your career, and honestly, our physical environment.
So let's kick things off with a pretty wild but absolutely crucial question raised by investigative journalist Karen Haw. She's spent years talking to hundreds of insiders at the top AI firms, and she asks, are we actually being gaslit by the AI industry? Like, are tech executives deliberately pushing these extreme sci-fi narratives just to distract us from the reality of how AI is actually being built right now? It really makes you wonder if they're spinning this mythology to make sure they stay the sole architects of our technological future.
Which brings us to part one, the empires of AI. Let's look at the myth versus the reality. You've probably noticed how tech leaders keep moving the goalposts when they talk about AGI, right? You'll hear executives like Sam Altman jumping constantly between apocalyptic warnings, literally saying things like worst case, it's lights out for everyone, and then in the next breath, promising these utopian visions of curing cancer and solving climate change. And look, those shifting goalposts, they aren't an accident. Depending on whether they're talking to regulators, consumers, or investors, they engineer this language specifically to mobilize massive amounts of capital while effectively warding off any government oversight.
And it's not just him. We see this exact same framing across the board from other industry leaders. Dario Amodei casually throwing out that there's a 10 to 25% chance of human catastrophe. This back-to-back juxtaposition of extreme fear and ultimate salvation creates a really profound cognitive dissonance for us. It pressures the public and, frankly, policymakers to just surrender control of the technology over to these corporate empires. It's built on this premise that only they are equipped to navigate us away from that 25% doom scenario and toward a utopia.
But let's ground ourselves for a second. Part 2, AI's real business impact in the workplace today.
Because the sheer scale of disruption is happening right now, in the real world. Just look at what's going on at Klarna. This is wild. In roughly a year, their headcount dropped from a peak of 7,400 all the way down to about 3,000 employees. How? Well, they successfully deployed AI to handle 70% of their customer service conversations. Now, they haven't done massive layoffs, but by relying on natural attrition and totally freezing hiring, the company is fundamentally shrinking its human footprint, all while their revenue just keeps growing.
Business executives are making very deliberate choices here. They're shrinking their workforces because they're relying on AI models that are finally deemed good enough to replace human labor in fields we used to think were totally secure. Like the CEO of Klarna outright said, the production cost of software is plummeting to almost zero because code is now machine-produced. We're seeing a massive shift where companies are actively choosing automated efficiency over large teams of people.
And it's probably hitting your industry too. According to recent research from Anthropic, these specific white-collar sectors are facing profound disruption. We're not talking about physical robots replacing construction workers yet. Companies are aggressively racing to automate core operational tasks in office administration, finance, law, media, and programming.
And here's the metric that really stops you in your tracks. 40%. Anthropic's report predicts a massive 40% reduction in entry-level jobs within those disrupted sectors. I mean, think about that. If nearly half of all entry-level roles just vanish because AI is handling the basic coding, drafting, and admin work, we are looking at a massive bottleneck for the next generation of the workforce who are just trying to get their foot in the door.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, it creates a broader economic crisis because the traditional career ladder is literally breaking. Entry-level and mid-tier roles get hollowed out entirely. And what you're left with is this really stark divide. At the top, you have a small group of highly paid human orchestrators directing the AI agents. And at the bottom, displaced professionals pushed into a booming, but honestly grueling, new industry just to pay the bills. Which brings us to the hidden underbelly of all this: data annotation. If you're not familiar, this is the incredibly repetitive manual labor of labeling text, images, and video to teach AI models how to actually perform tasks. And it's currently one of the fastest growing job sectors out there. This is exactly where thousands of highly educated, laid-off professionals are finding themselves, executing these tiny piecemeal tasks all day just so the algorithms can learn.
And here is the incredibly dark irony of this whole hidden supply chain. Many of these workers, and we're talking about award-winning Hollywood directors and seasoned marketers, are trapped waiting on Slack for these little piecemeal tasks. They are literally training the next generation of AI models to automate the exact white-collar jobs they were just laid off from. It's a vicious, inhumane cycle that atomizes work and strips away professional dignity.
Moving on to part 3, the hidden infrastructure costs. Let's talk about the physical toll. Because beyond the human labor, these AI business models extract a staggering physical toll on the planet. The cloud isn't actually floating in the sky. It lives in massive, resource-hungry facilities on the ground. The brute force scaling required for these huge language models needs infrastructure that is almost hard to wrap your head around. Take OpenAI's proposed Stargate facility in Texas. It would be the size of Central Park and consume over a gigawatt of power. That's equivalent to 20% of New York City's entire energy draw. And these massive server farms also drain incredible amounts of fresh water for cooling, often pulling from communities that are already struggling with severe droughts.
And sometimes, those consequences are incredibly direct. Down in Memphis, Elon Musk's Colossus supercomputer is bypassing local grid limits by running on 35 methane gas turbines. These turbines are pumping toxins directly into the air of a working-class community, directly exacerbating asthma and respiratory illnesses. The local residents weren't even told what was happening until they literally smelled the gas in their own living rooms. So yeah, these are the very real, very physical costs associated with the current AI boom.
So, is there a better way? Part 4, bicycles versus rockets. A more sustainable path.
Considering the massive human labor costs and the environmental destruction, you have to ask, isn't there a more sustainable way to harness this technology? A path that doesn't demand such a punishing price? Karen Ha uses this absolutely brilliant metaphor that I love. We don't need a massive, resource-hungry rocket for every single business problem. Large language models, those are rockets. They require astronomical compute and energy. But there is enormous value in building highly efficient AI bicycles. These are specialized models trained on small, curated datasets that require a fraction of the energy.
A perfect example of an AI bicycle. DeepMind's AlphaFold. Instead of scraping the entire internet just to generate a chat response, it was trained specifically on amino acid sequences. This highly targeted, low-compute model successfully predicted protein folding, which dramatically accelerated drug discovery. It was so impactful, it actually won the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. It just goes to show that we absolutely can build AI to solve profound human problems without destroying local power grids or exploiting gig workers.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about this final point. The future of this technology isn't completely set in stone yet. If we want sustainable adoption of AI in business, we have to demand transparency. Look closely at your own company's strategy. Are your technological choices extracting value from humanity, or are they actually adding to it? And maybe most importantly, are you launching a rocket when an AI bicycle is really all you need?